Back in the early 70s, motocross racing was still in its infancy. The sport saw amazing growth throughout the United States. It was back then that a dedicated group of riders formed what has become the dominant motocross organization in the region, the Sports Riders Association of Colorado. But that was then, and this is now. The 1994 SRAC season saw more than 1,400 racers compete in 28 classes for both motocross and supercross points.
All right, everybody. Welcome to my podcast here, the Colorado Motocross Files. And what this show is about today is a few subjects that have been on my mind about Colorado motocross racing. These are basically just my opinions and my beliefs, not the opinions of anything else I'm affiliated with, just solely my opinions on Colorado racing and how I think that we can probably improve it and improve some of our riders and the system that we bring them up in. So what I'd like to do today is talk about a few subjects that I have here. I'm just going to go through a few of these subjects real quick. What they are proficiencies in the mini bike classes. I believe we need to bring back the novice, the intermediate, and the expert divisions in the mini bike classes. The number system. There's been several different number systems throughout the years with the several different organizations. The SRAC used to have a system where if you were a novice racer, you would have the choice of choosing anywhere between 300 to 500, right? And then you would have a black background with a white number. And then once you advance to the intermediate class, I believe you got to choose anywhere between the number 100 and 300. And 299 or something like that. That was kind of the division that the B riders, the number system that they were relegated to in a way. When you got to the pro class, that's when you could earn a 2-digit or a single-digit number, and that was kind of a big deal back then. When you saw a pro rider with a white background, black number, it was like number 6 or 7 or 9 or 12, whatever, you knew that rider was really good in the state, and they earned that number. And so there's been many changes with the number system throughout the years, but one subject that I wanted to bring up was running single digit numbers for riders that just sign up, right? For example, a friend of mine, that races with my son Carter, they moved from Texas, I believe, and they ended up buying a bike, and it just came with the number 4 on it. And so when they got to Colorado, they signed up to race a few races here, and then when he signed up, they're like, well, what number you got on your bike? And they're like, can we do number 4? And they just let him sign up with number 4. Here I go again with back in my day, but back in the system that we grew up with, you had to earn that single digit number 4, right? Like if you saw number 4, you're like, oh man, that kid is the 4th earned a number 4 in the state. He's the 4th fastest rider, or he's a top 5 rider in the state of Colorado. So let's move on to this next subject here. The mark system that SRAC used to have. What this was the mark system consisted of 5 marks with a win an overall win at an event here in Colorado, or 7 marks without a win would advance you into the next proficiency. So, for example, if you were a 125 novice racer and you raced for 1 year and you earned 5 marks and you won an overall race throughout that year, once you earn that 5th mark on your 5th win or your 5th overall mark, you would be advanced to the intermediate class or the B class. It was a way to advance riders up into the system and keep sandbaggers from just chilling in the same class and hanging out in there. So what the mark system was at a particular race, let's say there's 25 riders on the gate. And that was pretty common back in the day to have a fairly full gate each class. The top 2% of that class on the overall at the end of the day would get a mark. So if you got second, you and the winner would both walk away with a mark on your file or, whatever your record in your membership. So you would advance to the next class once you got 5 or 7 marks. If you got 7 marks, you didn't get an overall win, but you got 7 marks and you were bumped up to the next class. You're like, get out of there. You don't need to be staying in there anymore. You've obviously proved yourself in there. And so the current system that I see right now, I don't see any advancement and I don't see any incentive for kids to have a goal to move up because there's no advancement to move up. It's just age groups right now. And so, you have kids that are racing for the first time that may be 16 years old racing against kids that have many years experience just because they have the same bike and they're in the same age. And so if the mark system would prevent riders from sticking around in the same class, and I think it would give kids a goal to work towards each time. I don't know why there's kids that want to stick around in the same class and not advance to the pro class. Back when I raced, again, here I go with, my rant about, I'm so old school, whatever. I'm not very old school. I'm more mid school, okay? But back when I raced and when we raced, it was like, what's the fastest way for us to turn pro? Right? Like, I don't want to stick around in the novice or the intermediate class. I want to go straight to the pro class and start making money. I used to have a bunch of kids from New Mexico that would come up, called them the Dirty Dozen. It was Ivan Tedesco, the Tedescos, the Clarks, the Johnsons, Ryan Clark would come up. It was those guys would come up and bang bars with Colorado, and there's nothing like that anymore. Nobody comes here anymore. Everybody seems to leave and go to Texas, and that frustrates me, man. I know Texas is nice, and we've considered moving there ourselves, but man, we've got to step it up around here. And I'm willing to do whatever I can to help the organization, the tracks, the promoters, but I want your guys' opinions on a few of these subjects. So let's move on to something else. Talking about wanting to be a pro thing. Back when I was in school, and particularly junior high, early high school, I was one of the only kids in my school that raced, and I'm sure that's the way it is today with a few people out there. It's a little more common, but back then, man, like, nobody knew what I did. I missed prom. I missed all these dances and stuff like that to race Supercross on Saturday nights. And so when I was 15, 16, I was racing the 125 novice class. And I thought I was fairly good. And so, I would wear my jerseys to school, and, kids would ask me, "Oh, you race?" And I'm like, "Oh, yeah, I race motocross," And they're like, "Oh, what class do you race?" And I'd be like, "Oh, I race 125 novice, here in Colorado, whatever." And they'd be like, "Oh, you're not a pro?" You know, I'm like, well, I'd like to be. You know, I'm hoping to get there soon someday. You know, and, oh, I thought you were a pro. You know, and so it always irked me. Like, man, I want to make it to the pro class. You know, and I don't see that drive in these kids these days. I just see them wanting to stick around in one class, and it, you know, to be able to say, you know, I want to be a pro and make money. I think that's the reason that Colorado, the pro class, is lacking. Nobody wants to be a pro. And when you go to these races, even the biggest races here in Colorado, and you see, you know, two handfuls of riders on the gate, it's a little deflating. And the more pros we get in there to be a pro and race that class, the more money will be brought in, the more they could make, the better shows put on, the more encouragement for people to step it up and want to be a pro and watch these races. You know, there's some videos I'm going to show you here from 1994, just a local race at Aztec, and it's pretty much a full gate in the A class. The 125 pro class, the 250 pro class, and the open pro class all had full gates. And man, there was some players back there, and everybody was just dog eat dog. And I remember all the dads and everybody being competitive and standing down there with pit boards and, you know, and stuff like that. And nobody does that, you know. And it's a little more laid back and family oriented these days. But as far as like really wanting to be a pro, I think we need to get these kids through this system pretty quick. You know, the path that I'm kind of projecting for my son Carter is when he gets off super minis, when he jumps on a big bike, he better be a player immediately and start winning, and then jump right into the pro class here locally. I'm not talking nationally. You know, that's a completely different level. But, you know, I believe if you're going to get to those steps, you don't miss a step. You know, some guys are like, he's ready for a 125 now. I'm like, yeah, he's ready to ride one. He's not ready to race one right now. Yeah. So, yeah. Anyway, and then another subject I have is, you know, as far as the program for the day. The SRAC used to run a split program, and so what that meant was novice and older age groups and some of the younger kids would race in the morning. So you'd sign up at the butt crack of dawn, race till about 1 in the afternoon. Your races would be over, and then the amateurs and pros would start flooding in and getting ready to race, and you would be done by 1 or 2 in the afternoon. Your day would be done. You can hang out and watch the pros race, or you could go home. What was nice about that is, for both sides, is, you know, the novices and the intermediates were done early and they could go home, or they could stay and watch the races. And then the pros, it was cool for them because a lot of them were teenagers or whatever, or young, you know, of course. And so they would sleep in, and so they didn't have to be at the track till 1 or 2 in the afternoon. But when I was a novice rider, watching them show up is what made me want to be a pro. They would show up, like I would be all dirty in my gear after hard motos and be beat to crap and about ready to go. And they'd be showing up all nice and stuff, just eat lunch, and their bikes looking nice, ready to do battle. And I'm like, man, that's where I want to be. You know, I want to ride the pro class. And so let's get the encouragement out there. Let's get these kids through the class. I'm calling you out, riders. You know who you are. And I think you need to step it up. Let's get this pro class going. Let's make Colorado Motocross a little bit better. Thanks for watching.
The 250 and Open Pro Supercross division provided some high-flying racing action in 1994. Number 997, Sean Morgan, drew first blood in the 250 and Open classes to lead Supercross points. Kip Sandell, Andy Atkins, Keith Campbell, Jared Carlson, and Brian Curtis were all players early on. But almost like clockwork, Andy Atkins grabbed the lead in the 250 class while Josh Kellogg charged to the top in the Open division. Keith Campbell, Jared Carlson, Chad Wollaston, Josh Kellogg, and Kip Sandell dropped in behind Atkins to finish out the 250 Supercross top 6 riders. In the Open class, Josh Kellogg nipped Andy by only 2 points to clinch the title. Andy in a solid second, followed by Jared Carlson, Keith Campbell, and Sean Morgan. We talked to Andy Atkins about the 1994 season and his near clean sweep of the pro classes.
It feels pretty good. The beginning of this year I had a goal of 6 number ones, and right now I'm got all 5.